It was a chilly Thursday evening when everything seemed to change, like the sudden stillness of a quiet moment that was completely unforeseen. It had been one of those days when the house felt overly silent, with only the hum of the refrigerator breaking the quiet. My husband John was working late in his office, one of those rare nights when he wasn't home by the time I was getting dinner ready. As I walked through our house, the warmth from the kitchen lights spilled into the hallway, but I couldn't shake the feeling of emptiness. I had always loved our home, the way the light filtered through the big bay windows in the living room, casting a soft glow over the hardwood floors, the peaceful quiet of the space, and the cozy rhythm it had. But that night, the house felt quieter than usual, as though it were waiting for something to happen. I had just set the table when I heard the front door creak open. A deep voice called from the hallway, followed by footsteps and laughter. It was Sam, one of John's colleagues, someone I'd met a few times. He was always polite, a bit too cheerful, but we never had more than a friendly acquaintance. "Hello, beautiful," John called out as he wrapped his arms around my waist and kissed my cheek. I smiled, letting the familiar comfort of his presence calm me. It was like the warmth of home had truly returned. But when I turned to look at Sam, I noticed something different in his eyes. Maybe it was the way he held my gaze just a bit too long, or the intensity of his smile, but there was something unsettling I couldn't pinpoint. "Sam, it's good to see you," I said, trying to mask my discomfort. "Dinner's almost ready, please sit down." "Oh, you didn't have to go through the trouble," Sam replied, his voice smoother than usual. He sat at the table, folding his hands in front of him, which wasn't his usual playful way. It felt almost like he was trying to gauge my reaction, studying me in a way that made me feel vulnerable. As we ate, the conversation flowed easily at first, just the usual talk about work, the weather, those small things that fill the silence when there's nothing else to say. But then Sam made a strange comment about our home, how peaceful it must be to live in such a place. That's when things began to change. He leaned forward, lowering his voice as if sharing a secret. "You know, I've always thought it would be interesting to live in a place like this full of history, memories, and comfort." I chuckled, thinking it was just the wine talking. "Well, you're always welcome to visit us any time. We'd be happy to have you." But Sam's eyes stayed locked on mine a little longer than they should have, and there was something unsettling in his gaze. "Maybe I'd like to experience more than just a visit," he said, a hint of mischief in his voice. "What if I told you I had a suggestion that might change things for you?" John laughed, clearly unaware of the tension growing in the room. "Oh, Sam, what are you getting at?" he teased, oblivious to the subtle shift in Sam's behavior, but I felt it. A cold wave of unease sweeping over me. Something about Sam's words felt too deliberate, too probing. It wasn't the kind of suggestion I was ready for, and yet I couldn't look away. I tried to shake off the feeling, but the room felt like it was closing in, the walls closing tighter with every passing second. Sam's gaze never left mine, and for the first time I wondered if I was misreading everything. Finally, Sam spoke again, but this time his tone was serious, almost too serious. "What if I told you there's a way to explore new experiences, things you've never considered before? Things that could change how you see your marriage, your life, everything." The weight of his words hit me, making my heart skip a beat as my mind raced to understand what he was really suggesting. John, blissfully unaware of the subtle tension, continued laughing at a joke Sam had made, but I couldn't focus on that. All I could hear was the strange suggestion hanging in the air, teasing me with its ambiguity. I glanced at John, unsure if I should address it, but the words caught in my throat. I knew whatever Sam was implying wasn't something I was ready to confront. I had no idea what he meant, but there was a chill creeping up my spine that I couldn't ignore. "Sam," I whispered, "what are you talking about?" He smiled, but it wasn't the playful smile I was used to. There was something darker about it, something that sent a shiver down my spine. "I think you know exactly what I mean," he replied, his voice low and filled with a quiet intensity that left me breathless. "But don't worry, we can talk more about it when the time is right." The words hung heavy in the air, filled with meaning I couldn't yet understand. My stomach twisted in knots as I tried to process what Sam had just said. I wasn't sure if I was scared, intrigued, or both. All I knew was that something had changed in that moment, something I couldn't shake. The next few days were a blur, a strange mix of normalcy and an underlying tension. Every time I entered the room where Sam had said those strange words, my pulse quickened. I could still feel the weight of his gaze, that knowing look he'd given me, as though something had already shifted between us. But I didn't say anything to John. He was completely unaware, lost in his own world of work and casual conversation. He didn't notice the undercurrent of change that had settled between me and Sam. I kept telling myself it was nothing, that Sam probably didn't mean anything by it, that I was reading too much into a moment that didn't matter. But each time I found myself alone with my thoughts, I couldn't shake the discomfort. At the back of my mind, it felt as though something inside me had been awakened, and I wasn't sure whether to fear it or embrace it. That Saturday, John suggested we have a quiet evening at home. He'd invited Sam over again, just the three of us. I almost hesitated, but he seemed so eager, and I didn't want to stir up trouble over something that felt so intangible. I was determined to push the unsettling thoughts to the back of my mind and focus on the warmth of our home, the comfort of our life together. When Sam arrived, he greeted me with a smile that seemed warmer than usual, though it wasn't the carefree energy I was used to. There was a subtle intensity behind it, something that made me feel both seen and exposed. I welcomed him inside, trying to ignore the nervous flutter in my chest. We sat in the living room, the soft glow of the lamps casting long shadows against the walls. John made some casual small talk, but I noticed Sam's eyes kept flicking toward me. It wasn't just looking, he was watching, studying me. Each time our eyes met, I felt an unspoken challenge in his gaze, an almost magnetic pull I couldn't explain. "Do you mind if I sit next to you?" Sam asked, his voice unnervingly calm. I blinked, unsure of how to respond. "Oh, of course, Sam," I said, trying to sound casual, even though my heart was racing. He settled next to me on the couch, too close for comfort. The air around us felt thick, charged, as though there was an invisible thread between us that I couldn't escape. John didn't seem to notice anything unusual. He kept chatting away as if everything were perfectly normal. But I was hyper-aware of the situation, Sam's proximity, the way he casually brushed against me when he reached for his drink. Each small gesture felt amplified, as if he were testing boundaries, trying to gauge my reaction. The evening passed in a haze. I tried to focus on the conversation, but my thoughts kept drifting back to Sam's suggestion. The idea of something new, something different. I didn't know what it was, but the way he spoke about it made it feel like an invitation that, if I accepted, would lead to something life-changing. But was I even ready for that? Could I allow myself to entertain the thought? I excused myself for a moment, needing to collect my thoughts. As I made my way to the kitchen, I heard laughter from the living room. It wasn't unusual, John and Sam always got along well, but this time it felt hollow to me, as if they were both playing roles, hiding something just beneath the surface. I stood by the sink, staring out the window, trying to clear my mind. The moonlight poured in through the glass, casting a soft silver glow across the room, but no matter how much I tried to focus on the peaceful beauty of the night, I couldn't stop thinking about Sam and his words. What was he really suggesting? Why did it feel so tempting? Suddenly, I heard the soft shuffle of footsteps behind me. I turned to see Sam standing in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable," he said, his voice low, almost apologetic. "I think you know that this isn't something we can just ignore." I swallowed, my heart pounding in my chest. "What are you talking about, Sam?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, though I felt a tremor in it. "This isn't something—" He stepped closer, his presence filling the room. I could feel the heat of his body, the intensity of his gaze, and it felt as though the world around us disappeared. I wanted to step back, but my feet were frozen in place. "Listen," he said softly. "I'm not trying to make this difficult. I just can't stop thinking about you, about what could happen if you let go of the things holding you back." His words lingered in the air, heavy with meaning. I didn't know how to respond. I felt a rush of conflicting emotions, shock, confusion, but beneath it all, a stir of curiosity. What was he really asking? Was this a test, a game, or something more? "I'm married, Sam," I whispered, my throat tight. "You know that. This isn't something we can talk about." He didn't step back, though. Instead, he reached out, brushing his hand against mine. The touch was light, almost innocent, but it sent a jolt of electricity through me. "I understand," he said softly but firmly. "But sometimes life pushes us toward things we didn't expect, and sometimes we just need to allow ourselves to feel alive." I pulled my hand away, my breath coming faster. My thoughts were racing. This was wrong, wasn't it? But why did it feel like I was on the edge of something I wasn't sure I could walk away from? As I turned to leave the kitchen, I heard Sam's voice again, barely above a whisper. "We can talk more later when you're ready." I didn't know what he meant, but somehow I felt like I already knew. Deep down, I already knew. The days that followed were a whirlwind of emotions. Confusion, guilt, curiosity, each one swirling around me, creating a storm I wasn't sure how to navigate. The air felt heavier every time I entered a room where Sam might be. And yet, I couldn't stop thinking about what he had said. I couldn't forget the way his hand had brushed against mine, the warmth of his touch, or the intensity in his eyes when he spoke about feeling alive. It echoed in my mind, uninvited and persistent. I kept replaying that moment in the kitchen. That simple, soft touch had unlocked something inside me, a part of myself I hadn't known was there, buried under years of routine, responsibilities, and the steady rhythm of life. My marriage to John had been my anchor, yet despite all my efforts to deny it, I couldn't ignore the shift inside me. Something both exhilarating and unsettling had stirred. But then there was John, my husband, the man who had always provided stability and affection. I couldn't let myself disregard everything we had built together, even as the tension between Sam and me intensified. How could I betray the trust that defined our relationship? How could I even entertain the notion of following the path Sam hinted at when my entire life, our life, was entwined with John's? It all reached a turning point on a Wednesday evening, a few days after Sam's last visit. John had invited Sam over for what seemed like another ordinary evening. Casual drinks, friendly conversation. But from the moment Sam walked in, the atmosphere felt different. It was as if the space we shared had shifted. His gaze drew me in, demanding that I confront the unresolved tension between us. As the evening progressed, I found myself needing a moment of solitude and retreated to the kitchen, hoping that the quiet would help me gather my thoughts. It didn't. Instead, I heard familiar footsteps approaching, the unmistakable sound of Sam following me. When I turned to face him, my heart raced. This was the moment, the point where I had to choose between giving in to the pull he had awakened or walking away from the steady life I'd always known, one that had never asked for such a choice. "I've been waiting for you to decide," Sam murmured, his voice soft and persuasive. "I don't want to pressure you, but I'm not going anywhere. We both know you're curious. You can feel it, can't you?" I swallowed hard, my throat dry. The decision loomed before me. I could keep pretending nothing had changed, clinging to the hope that things would return to normal. Or I could admit the truth, that Sam's presence had opened a door I could no longer close. "Sam," I said hesitantly, my voice barely steady, "I don't know what you expect from me, what you're asking. It's too much." He stepped closer, his presence overwhelming yet oddly comforting. "It's not about what I want," he replied gently. "It's about what you need, what you've been missing. I'm not here to tear your life apart. I'm here to show you there's more than what you've settled for, more than the life you've been living. All you have to do is reach for it." His words hit me deeply, leaving me breathless. A part of me wanted to reject him, to say no and end the madness. But another part, a quiet, forgotten part, urged me to consider that maybe this was what I'd been unknowingly craving all along. Before I could respond, Sam touched my arm. It was a gentle gesture, an invitation rather than a demand. His eyes held mine, searching for something unspoken. "I'm not asking you to make any sudden choices," he whispered. "I just want you to be open to the idea of something new, something exciting that could make you feel truly alive again. His words enveloped me, both comforting and suffocating. I felt trapped, caught between the life I had and the possibility he offered. It was a life I couldn't define but also couldn't ignore. At that moment, John's voice echoed from the living room, snapping me back to reality. My heart skipped a beat as I instinctively pulled away from Sam. "I need to go back," I murmured, stepping out of his reach. I can't do this." Sam didn't try to stop me. He said nothing as I walked away, my mind racing with chaotic thoughts. I forced a smile as I rejoined John on the couch, but deep inside, I knew something had irrevocably shifted. I could feel it in the tightness in my chest when I glanced at Sam, in the way his presence lingered in the room despite the distance between us. The rest of the evening was a blur. John and Sam laughed, drank and talked while I pretended to engage, my thoughts elsewhere, somewhere I didn't fully understand but couldn't escape. When it was time for Sam to leave, I offered a polite goodbye. It was a hollow gesture because my mind was already far away, torn between what had been and what might be. That night, I lay awake in bed beside John, who slept soundly. The room felt cold, though I knew the blankets should have kept me warm. Yet there was an invisible chasm between us. Not because of anything John had done, but because of the choice I had made. Like it or not, I had crossed a line, stepping into something both thrilling and terrifying. In the still darkness, I knew that whatever came next, I would never be the same.